My name is Celine Ward. I come from a place where daughters are meant to be quiet, polite, and grateful, even when everything inside them is breaking. I spent most of my life being the invisible one, the one who made room so others could shine. And for a long time, I told myself that was love. 3 days before I was supposed to board a flight to Paris for a scholarship interview that could change my life, I discovered my passport was missing. Not lost, missing. Ripped from the secure folder where I'd kept it for months, tucked between my visa paperwork and my acceptance letter. I searched every drawer, every pocket, every space where something might have slipped. Nothing. Until I looked up and saw her standing there. Calla, my younger sister, my parents' pride. The same girl who once accidentally spilled bleach on my prom dress, who claimed she never saw my college acceptance letter until it was too late to reply. "You really should be more careful with your things," she said, smiling like always. That sweet, practiced smile that had fooled everyone for years. Everyone but me. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just nodded and told her I'd double-check the kitchen. Then I went to my room and opened the hollowed-out Bible I'd hidden since January. My backup passport lay inside, untouched. My heart pounded steady as I texted Marcus. Plan Omega is a go. They thought they could stop me one last time. They were wrong. I was 9 when I first realized that love in my house had a sharp edge. Calla was 7, and she'd just been named Star of the Week in her second-grade class. Mom printed banners. Dad bought cupcakes. I had a regional science fair ribbon clutched in my hand, but no one noticed. They were too busy setting up a surprise party for her at the church fellowship hall. That's how it always was. Calla shined, and I became the backdrop. For years, I convinced myself I was overreacting, that maybe I was just sensitive. But as I grew older, the accidents stopped looking like accidents. The time my science fair project fell off the garage shelf the night before regionals. The college prep seminar I missed because my alarm never went off. A clock I later found tucked into the back of Calla's closet. The college acceptance letter from a university I'd dared to dream about. Gone. My parents told me it must have gotten lost in the mail. It showed up a month after the deadline, opened and creased. And every time, Calla would play the innocent. "You poor thing," she'd say. "You really have to stay organized, Celine." My parents? They called me dramatic, forgetful, prone to losing things. Dad would sigh into his morning coffee, muttering about how I needed to grow thicker skin. Mom preferred silence, unless it was to marvel at Calla's latest debate win or violin recital. So I adapted. Quietly, strategically. I started keeping copies of everything. Digital backups, hidden folders, screenshots of every important email. I wrote everything down, documented every coincidence. I became my own archivist, recording the slow erosion of trust one sabotage at a time. And I started preparing for the day I'd leave. The scholarship to Paris had been a lifeline. A full 18-month program through the European Youth Policy Institute. I applied in secret, wrote my essay in the back room at the library, and submitted it on a prepaid SIM card so my parents couldn't trace the data. When I got the acceptance letter, I didn't tell anyone. Not right away. I just stared at the screen, my hand over my mouth, and thought, they're going to try to take this from me too. So I planned. Every detail. A backup passport hidden in a hollowed-out Bible I'd bought for $4 at a thrift store. A duffel packed with essentials, ready under my bed. Babysitting money saved for years, stashed under a loose floorboard. Every item chosen for necessity, not sentiment. No photos, no heirlooms, just what I needed to survive. I played along at home, smiled at dinner, laughed at Calla's rehearsed stories. Let them think I was soft, still obedient, still theirs. But I wasn't. I was building an exit. When I told them about the Paris program 2 weeks before my flight, I watched the discomfort ripple across their faces. Mom pressed her lips into a thin line. Dad adjusted his tie like someone had accused him of a crime. Calla smiled, but her eyes flared. A flicker of panic she tried to hide. "Well," Mom said finally, "that's ambitious." Dad added, "Seems a bit rushed, don't you think?" "And Calla?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Just be careful, Celine. Not everything works out the way you hope." That night, I added a second copy of my flight itinerary to my emergency folder, just in case, because I'd seen this before. They didn't destroy things all at once. They chipped away slowly, discrediting, undermining, making sure I'd question myself before I ever questioned them. But this time, I wasn't going to give them the chance. I woke at 2 a.m., not to an alarm, but to instinct. My body had learned the rhythm of escape after months of rehearsals. Every movement was precise, like choreography for survival. The house groaned softly, its old bones settling. Dad's snoring echoed from the master bedroom. I sat up in bed, heart thudding steady, and reached for the Bible on my shelf. The hollowed pages held my escape. The backup passport, untouched and waiting. I pressed the cover to my chest, breathing in the moment. This was it. No more waiting for permission to live. My duffel was already packed, each item weighed, folded, and positioned like evidence in a courtroom. No room for anything that wasn't absolutely essential. I left behind the framed certificates in the laundry room, the soccer medals buried in the attic, and every photograph that proved nothing. Beneath the floorboard, I retrieved the envelope of cash. $2,340, earned one babysitting shift at a time. I slid it into the side pocket of my bag and glanced around my room one last time. This wasn't a goodbye. It was an escape from a place that never made space for me. I scribbled a note and placed it on my pillow. I know what you did. I've always known. That was all. The full truth compressed into 8 words. Sliding open the window, I hoisted the duffel down first. It landed with a soft thud in Mom's hydrangeas. A fitting farewell. I dropped to the ground and moved through the yard like smoke. Across the street, headlights stayed off as Marcus leaned against his sister's borrowed Honda. His shoulders straightened when he saw me. "You sure about this?" he whispered as he opened the trunk. "They took the original," I said, holding up the second passport. "Just like we thought they would." His jaw clenched. "I hoped we were wrong." "They've had years of practice," I said, handing him the folder with my documents. He nodded and placed it gently in the glove box. "Remember the prom dress?" "Bleach," I said, "but no one ever asked who moved the bottle." He shook his head. "It's always you cleaning up their mess." Not anymore. We drove in silence, the road stretching ahead like a lifeline. No music, just the hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the old car frame. Marcus kept his eyes forward, but I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers flexed against the steering wheel. "Your mom and dad, they're gonna flip," he said eventually. "They'll survive," I replied. "So will Calla." At the airport, the early morning crowd shuffled between terminals like ghosts. I clutched my boarding pass like armor. Every checkpoint I cleared felt like a door slamming shut behind me. One more chain broken, one more lie left behind. My hands trembled only once, when my phone lit up with a call from Mom. I watched the name flash across the screen before hitting decline. She didn't deserve my explanation. Neither did Dad, who had called my dreams unrealistic, or Calla, who'd taken everything from notebooks to confidence and called it sisterhood. I made it to my gate. Paris, France, my first time flying, my first time leaving the state, my first time choosing for myself. Marcus waited near security, watching until I disappeared from view. I looked back once, just once. His hand raised in a quiet wave. I nodded. Then I stepped onto the plane. As the engine roared to life and the ground peeled away beneath us, I felt it. That weight I'd carried for so long, finally lifting. Kentucky shrank below the clouds. The past drifted into silence. I wasn't running anymore. I was flying. Paris didn't welcome me with parades or trumpets. Just cold air, blinking signs in French, and the scent of roasted chestnuts wafting through the arrivals terminal. I gripped my passport so tightly my knuckles turned white. The one they never found. The one that held everything they tried to take from me. A woman with silver-streaked hair held a sign with my name. Celine Ward, European Youth Policy Forum. Her smile creased the corners of her eyes. "I'm Renee," she said, extending her hand. "Your mentor. Your essay was remarkable. Not dramatic, not difficult, not too much. Just remarkable." Something in me cracked open. The next few days passed in a blur. Orientation, icebreakers, strangers with stories that echoed pieces of mine, a girl from Lebanon who taught computer science to displaced children, a boy from Australia whose grandmother had fought for indigenous land rights. They talked about injustice and hope in the same breath. For once, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to belong. On the third day, we gathered in a grand hall lined with the flags of 30 nations. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as Renee took the podium. Each of you will speak briefly, she announced, about why you're here, what drives you to serve. My pulse jumped. I hadn't prepared for this. I had statistics about youth civic engagement scribbled in my notebook, talking points, safe facts. But as the microphone passed from student to student, I knew I couldn't recite anything safe. When it reached me, I stood slowly. 60 pairs of eyes turned toward me. In my hometown, I began, they say a woman's highest calling is to serve her family. My voice wavered, then steadied. They don't tell you that sometimes family becomes the cage, that love can become chains, link by link, wrapped around your wings until you can't even remember how to fly. Silence. Even the flags seemed to pause their fluttering. I'm here, I continued, because service must start with seeing the humanity in ourselves, because we can't lift others if we're not allowed to stand tall, because the most dangerous people are often the ones who clip your wings, with a smile. A single clap broke the silence, then another, then a wave. Renee's eyes glistened. Miss Ward, she said quietly as she took the mic, I'd like you to consider speaking at the Strawberg Forum next month. That evening, my phone lit up with messages from home. Voicemails from Mom. Sweetheart, what will people think? This rebellion has gone far enough. Texts from Kalia. Everyone's saying you abandoned the family. Pastor Don quoted you in his sermon about the prodigal child. I hovered over the block button. A knock on my door saved me from deciding. Emma, my doormate from Montreal, held 2 mugs of tea. Rough day? She didn't wait for an answer. Just set a mug down and curled into my desk chair like she belonged there. My mom always says tea fixes everything, she added. She's wrong about most things, but not that. I laughed for the first time in weeks. From there, things shifted. Our study group became a kind of makeshift family. We cooked dinner together, debated late into the night, traded jokes in half a dozen languages. Professor Laurent asked me to be his research assistant after I respectfully dismantled his theory on generational policy gaps. Renee never brought up my orientation speech again, but doors began opening, meetings arranged. My name made its way into rooms I never thought I'd enter. Until the night before Strawberg. It was almost 3 a.m. My dorm room glowed with lamplight as I revised the last paragraph of my speech. Outside, Paris slept beneath a sky of flickering stars. My phone buzzed. A new Instagram post from Kala. A throwback photo of the two of us. Her arm looped around my shoulder at a high school debate tournament. Caption, so proud of my amazing sister speaking tomorrow at the European Youth Forum. Proud sister, family first. My hands trembled as I turned the screen face down. Another notification. Mom's email. Subject line, your family will be there to support you. 3 exclamation points. 3 tiny knives. I didn't open it. A gentle knock pulled me from the spiral. Renee stood in the hallway, tablet in hand. They're coming, I whispered. She nodded. They won't get near the speaker prep rooms. We've arranged everything. They're not coming to watch me succeed, I said. No, she replied. But that's exactly what they're going to witness. The morning of the forum, I stood behind the curtain, heels planted, blazer sharp, notes steady in my hands. From the shadows, I saw them. Mom in pearls, Dad in his stiff church suit, Kala in lemon yellow, eyes scanning like a hunter. 5 minutes, Miss Ward, the stage manager whispered. I breathed deeply. Not for them, for me, for the girl who once stayed silent so others could speak louder, for every empty shelf where my awards should have been, for the suitcase hidden under my bed, and the Bible with a passport no one was meant to find. And then, I walked out. I didn't see their faces until I reached the podium. From the stage, the crowd blurred into shadow, except for the back row. My mother sat rigid, hands folded just right. My father's jaw was set tight, and Calla, in lemon yellow, watched me like a hawk in a courtroom. My name is Celine Ward, I said, gripping the mic. And I'm here to talk about voices never meant to be heard. Pause. Not because they weren't strong, but because someone made sure they never got the chance. I spoke of silence, of sabotage dressed as sisterhood, of protection that felt more like a cage. I pulled out my passport, letting the light catch the cover. This is my second passport, I said, because when you grow up watching your future go missing, you learn to make backups. You learn to hide your joy like contraband. You learn that sometimes the ones who love you most are the ones who clip your wings the quietest. Phones lifted, cameras flashed. In the back row, my mother's hand covered her mouth. Calla stared, motionless, but this wasn't for them. When I finished, the crowd stood. Applause. Not for my pain, but for my defiance, for surviving with my voice intact. Later that night, the internet lit up. Articles, quotes, clips from the live stream. My hometown paper called me a voice for the next generation. Calla posted a graduation photo. Proud of my sister, she wrote. Always knew she'd do great things. I blocked the notification. My parents left voicemail after voicemail. Mom's voice danced between guilt and concern. Dad sounded uncertain for the first time in my life, but I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on my work. Emma and I pitched a policy paper. Renee introduced me to leaders who treated me as an equal. Each meeting, each panel, each late-night study session brought me closer to something I'd never had, myself. Then, one afternoon, my inbox chimed. An invitation. Meadowbrook College wanted me to keynote their rural leadership forum. I laughed. Emma looked up from her laptop. Going? Yes, I said. Not for them. For me. That night, I replied, happy to speak. I'll be in town. Open to meeting, if you're ready to listen. No drama, no performance, just choice. A week later, Aunt Willa messaged, we'll be there, not for them, for you. And they were. I stood before a room full of teachers and church folks who'd known me since I was 10. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I simply said, the hardest part isn't leaving. It's believing you have the right to stay gone. Afterward, as people filed out, I saw her. Calla. She didn't speak, just watched. And maybe, for the first time, understood I wasn't following her anymore. I turned and walked away. Toward Emma, who held out tea with a grin. Toward a future no one else could sabotage. 6 months have passed since that speech. My dorm wall in Paris is covered with conference badges and Polaroids, snapshots of the life I built, not the one I was given. The old Celine would have hung back in corners, double-checking exits, waiting for something to go wrong. This version walks through doors without flinching. The new passport sits on my desk, not hidden, not hollowed into a book or shoved beneath a floorboard, just there, visible, owned. My phone still buzzes sometimes with messages from home. Some days, it's Mom's carefully phrased guilt dressed up as concern. Other days, it's silence. I no longer flinch either way. I don't need them to approve of the woman I've become. Marcus just got accepted into the Paris exchange program. Emma and I are co-authoring a piece on educational equity that's being reviewed by an international journal. And I've been asked to return to Meadowbrook College to help design a youth civic engagement curriculum. That last invitation came with a short, polite message. We believe your voice could inspire students who feel unseen. I smiled when I read it, not bitter, just whole. They thought silence would make me obedient, that clipping my wings would make me safe. But all it did was teach me how to build better ones. Sometimes I wonder if Calla regrets it, what she stole, what she broke. But I don't dwell on it. I'm not here to carry her consequences. I'm here to carry my own life. This wasn't just about a passport. It was about reclaiming my narrative, piece by piece. It was about refusing to live as someone else's shadow. It was about standing in the light and not apologizing for how brightly I burned. They thought they locked the door behind me, but I found another, and when I stepped through, I didn't just escape. I arrived. My name is Thalia Marin. I'm 35, a strategy director at a brand agency in Seattle, and I've spent most of my life being the reliable one, the capable daughter, the one who didn't need much, the one who quietly let her younger sister take the spotlight, the praise, and the last slice of cake, because that's what I was taught love looked like. But nothing prepared me for the moment Lyndon, my own sister, stole my wedding. Not just the date or the venue. She took everything, with my parents' blessing. And my fiancé? He didn't stop her. He watched it happen. And that's when I realized. This wasn't just a family betrayal. This was a setup. I didn't just lose a wedding. I was targeted. And when I finally uncovered the truth, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I took back control, quietly, deliberately, and permanently. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted the most, stay with me. You need to hear what happened next. Growing up in the Marin household meant learning early on that fairness was negotiable and visibility was optional, at least for me. My sister Lyndon was the star, the golden child with big blue eyes and a dramatic flair that kept everyone orbiting around her emotional weather. I was older by 3 years, quieter, more logical. I asked for little and got even less. My achievements, honor roll, scholarships, landing my first job, were met with polite nods. But when Lyndon got a participation ribbon in a middle school art show, my mother threw her a garden party. By the time I was in college, I had made peace with the imbalance. Or so I thought. I carved out a life of independence, moved across the country to build my career in Seattle, and rose through the ranks on nothing but talent and sheer work ethic. I built a world where my worth was measured by strategy decks and client wins, not by how loudly I cried or how many times I failed in front of my parents. Then I met Graham Mercer. I was giving a keynote at a brand symposium in San Francisco when he approached me. Tailored suit, steel gray eyes, and the kind of self-assurance that made the room tilt slightly toward him. Your breakdown of emotional brand equity, he said, was surgical. I'd like to buy you coffee. Or maybe offer you a job. He wasn't joking, but he wasn't pushy either. It felt respectful, curious, but not invasive. I didn't know it then, but that would be his pattern. Give just enough to feel safe, never enough to feel seen. Graham was unlike anyone I dated. Precise, calm, brilliant in the way high-functioning people can be when they've built entire identities out of knowing what everyone wants to hear. We talked about architecture, obscure documentaries, niche vineyards in Oregon. Within 2 months, I was in love. Within 6, we were engaged. He proposed on a private overlook in the Cascades, the sun setting behind us, a photographer he had hired hidden in the trees. The ring was vintage, Art Deco, with a fire that caught the light like it had something to say. I said yes, without hesitation. When I called my parents, my mother's first words weren't, "Congratulations." She said, "Does Lyndon know yet? She's been struggling since her breakup with Kyle." Not exactly the response I'd imagined, but I brushed it off, because for once in my life, I had something that was entirely mine. We booked a venue in Bainbridge, glass walls, water views, early summer roses. My Pinterest boards bloomed, linen swatches, calligraphy samples, playlists. I didn't even care that Graham wasn't interested in the details. I figured that was normal. I was used to doing things myself. But the moment I emailed my save the dates, Lyndon called. She was excited, overly so, asked about the caterer, the DJ, even the signature cocktails. I remember thinking, for a woman who usually rolled her eyes at wedding talk, she was suddenly very involved. I didn't see it coming, not yet, but the storm was building. It started with flowers. Lyndon texted me one afternoon, "Peonies and ranunculus? That's such a bold choice. Not very you, though." Not very me? I stared at the screen, confused. I hadn't told anyone, except Graham and my florist, about the flowers. But I dismissed it. Maybe she guessed. Maybe it was a lucky assumption. Then she showed up to my gown fitting. Uninvited. "I happened to be in the neighborhood," she said breezily, as if my tailor was a casual stop between mani-pedis. She offered commentary on the silhouettes I tried, made notes on her phone, and asked the boutique owner if they had this design in a blush tone. I wasn't sure why she was even there. She wasn't in the bridal party. That was intentional. I had chosen friends from work and college, women who'd seen me through career pivots and heartbreaks. I didn't want the emotional weight of navigating sisterhood politics during wedding planning. But under pressure from my mother, I added Lyndon last minute. She just wants to feel included, Mom said. You're always so independent. Try to let her in for once. So I let her in, just a crack, and she walked through like it was her house. And Lyndon began forwarding inspo from wedding blogs, emailing vendors behind my back, and referring to our day in texts. When I asked her to ease off, she laughed and said, I'm just trying to help you not make boring choices. I should have drawn a line right there, but I hesitated, because I didn't want to seem like the jealous sister, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't share. Then Graham began acting strange too. He grew quieter when Lyndon was around, more distracted. Once, I found them talking on the balcony during a family dinner. They went silent when I stepped outside. She was just asking about our honeymoon plans, Graham said. Didn't realize it was classified information. I didn't press. I didn't want to be that woman. Suspicious. Controlling. 2 weeks later, my parents invited us all over for dinner. Nothing unusual, until my mother said there was something important they wanted to discuss. What followed felt like an ambush in slow motion. My father cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact. Thalia, things have changed. Financially, your mother and I, well, we can't support your wedding the way we promised. I blinked. It's fine. We're covering most of it anyway. It was always optional. But, my mother jumped in, Lyndon and Evan just got engaged. I turned to Lyndon, who flashed a sparkling ring I'd never seen before. We're thinking June 15th, she said, smiling. Same venue. It's already all set up. It just makes sense. My fork clattered onto the plate. That's my date, I said flatly. That's my venue. That's my wedding. Yours isn't for another few months, my mother said carefully. There's time to reschedule. No, I said. There's not. I signed the contract, paid the deposits. Technically, your name and Graham's are both on the paperwork, my father murmured. So Evan and Lyndon spoke with the venue coordinator, and they were able to transfer everything. Just like that, stolen, formal wear and flower arrangements and menus, stripped from me and handed to her. I looked at Graham, waiting for outrage. He just shrugged. Maybe it's not worth fighting over, he said. We can always find another venue. My body went cold. Lyndon leaned in, voice sweet as syrup. You can cry later. This day belongs to me now. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about love or family. This was war. For the next few days, I moved like a sleepwalker, answering emails, showing up to work, nodding through meetings, but everything felt muted, disjointed. I kept thinking, they couldn't have done this. Not really, not without realizing what it meant. But the truth was sharper than denial. They didn't care. Or worse, they thought I'd just accept it, like always. I tried to fight back. I called the venue, explained the mistake. It's not a mistake, the coordinator said apologetically. The couple on the contract submitted a written change request. Both names match. Graham had signed it, without telling me. The betrayal burned deeper than anything my family had done. He didn't even try to hide it. I just thought, why escalate things? He said. It's not like the wedding defines the relationship. Except it wasn't about the wedding anymore. It was about how little I mattered. Lyndon began posting on Instagram. A countdown. Photos of dresses, ones nearly identical to the designs I had bookmarked. A caption that read, Dreams come true in the most unexpected ways. She tagged the venue, the florist, even the band I had chosen. I wanted to scream. Instead, I called Rena. She came over with a bottle of Cabernet and a fire in her eyes. This is not a misunderstanding, she said, scrolling through Lyndon's posts. It's theft. Systematic, targeted, manipulative theft. And Graham, don't even get me started on that smirking sociopath. I half laughed, half cried. It's so calculated. She's copying everything, even the first dance song. And Graham, he's not angry, he's calm, like this was always part of the plan. Maybe it was, Rena said darkly. Or maybe they're both getting played. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Rena hesitated. Do you know how Evan met Lyndon? I shook my head. She said it was random. Coffee shop. Rena frowned. And yet he has all the same interests Graham claimed to have. The same obscure hobbies. Even his speech patterns feel familiar. I pulled out my laptop, opened Lyndon's engagement post. Evan stood beside her, a polished man with a charming smile and eyes I hadn't noticed before. Eyes that didn't smile back. Eyes that reminded me of someone else. The next day, I came home early and found Graham gone. His laptop was still on the kitchen counter. His phone buzzed on the table. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The screen lit up with a message. Meeting confirmed. EP bringing the documents. 9 p.m. Wyndham Lobby. EP. Evan Porter? No, not anymore. I grabbed my coat and keys. When I arrived at the hotel, I stayed in the shadows of the lobby bar. It didn't take long. Graham was already seated, flipping through a folder. A man approached. Evan. Or whoever he really was. They shook hands like old colleagues, not like future in-laws. They spoke in hushed tones, exchanging papers, a USB drive. I didn't hear the words. I didn't need to. I saw enough. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a wedding hijack. It was a long game, and I just stumbled onto the center of it. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to Rena's apartment, heart pounding, skin crawling. When she opened the door, I was already halfway through explaining. They know each other, I said. Graham and Evan, or whoever he is. I saw them at the Wyndham. Papers, USB drives, the whole deal. This wasn't a setup for a wedding. It was a setup for something bigger. Rena didn't ask if I was sure. She just said, "We need help." By morning, we had hired a private investigator, Samuel Herrick, former white-collar crimes unit, now working freelance out of a downtown office that smelled like stale coffee and burned paper. I gave him everything: names, phone numbers, emails, copies of contracts, Graham's business card, and a printed screenshot of Evan's LinkedIn profile. "Give me a few days," he said. "But from what you're describing, I doubt this is just about money. It's about positioning, access." He was right. 3 days later, he called me back. "Your fiancé," he began, "isn't Graham Mercer. His real name is Grayson Keller, former CFO of Apex Holdings. He resigned during a federal audit. Never charged, but the SEC has a sealed report involving misappropriation of investor funds." My stomach twisted. "And Evan?" "Evan Porter doesn't exist either. He's Eli Petroff, former legal counsel at Apex, helped cover Keller's exit. They've worked together before, quietly. Untraceable shell companies, silent capital moves. And now," Herrick continued, "they've rebranded. New names, new cities, new fiancés, but the same goal: financial infiltration. I cross-referenced recent filings. They just launched a new advisory firm together, Porter Keller Capital." "Jesus. Your father's name appeared in their proposal packets," Herrick added. "They're targeting board members at his credit union. If he introduces them, even informally, that opens a gateway. One endorsement, one warm handoff, they're in." It all clicked. The urgency, the sudden engagement, the obsession with wedding logistics. They didn't care about flowers or vows. They wanted my father's network, my family's legitimacy, and I was the access point, or I had been. Now Lyndon was. "That's why they needed to swap the weddings," I whispered. "It wasn't jealousy, it was strategy." Rena nodded slowly. "Lyndon is easier to manipulate, more emotional. She thinks she's winning some petty sisterly game, but she's a pawn. And Grayson, played me to get there." That night, I stared at my reflection for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I planned. I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and handed over everything Herrick had compiled. Emails, entity registrations, their meeting at the hotel, Graham's alternate identity, Petrov's legal past, the shell companies. They were interested, but cautious. "We need proof of intent to defraud," said Agent Reynolds. "Ideally, a recorded pitch, something we can trace to money movement or solicitation." I think they're planning to pitch at the rehearsal dinner, I said. There'll be banking executives there, my dad's colleagues. She paused. Can you get us in? I can do better, I replied. I'll be there. I'll wear a wire. Rena looked horrified when I told her. That's dangerous. No, I said quietly. What's dangerous is letting them walk away and ruin more lives. I've been the quiet daughter, the reasonable one, my whole life. Not anymore. The game had changed, and this time, I wasn't the target. I was the trap. June 15th. The day that should have been mine. Instead of walking down the aisle, I walked into Lakeside Ridge, wearing a navy sheath dress and a calm expression that masked everything underneath. Clipped to my collar was a brooch. Simple, elegant, and wired. The FBI agents waited outside in an unmarked sedan. My part was simple. Get the recording. The venue looked breathtaking, because I had designed it that way. The flowers, the lighting, even the soft jazz floating through the air, it was all mine, and now it was hers. Lyndon sparkled in her white rehearsal dress, playing the perfect bride-to-be. My parents greeted me with restrained politeness, clearly unsure if I was there to behave or explode. I did neither. I watched. Grayson, was already handing out his investment folders to my father's banking friends. Evan, or Eli, stood beside him like a well-rehearsed echo. During dinner, I waited. They smiled. I smiled back. Then Evan rose, clinking his glass. Before dessert, I'd like to say a few words. Not just about love, but about legacy. Some of you have received materials about Porter Keller Capital. I stood. Before you invest, I said clearly, you need to know who you're dealing with. Gasps broke through the room as I walked to the AV table. With one click, my laptop illuminated the screen behind me. Grayson Keller, formerly Graham Mercer. SEC investigation. Apex Holdings. Slide 2. Eli Petrov, a.k.a. Evan Porter. Legal counsel for Apex. No longer licensed. Whispers turned to murmurs. Chairs scraped. My father looked stunned. These men orchestrated this wedding, I said, to gain access to my family's network. This isn't about love, it's about money. Graham's voice was low, measured. Thalia, let's not do this here. You already did. More slides followed. Company registrations, email exchanges. One even listed Lyndon's name as a leverage asset. She turned pale. You used me, she whispered, eyes locked on Evan. He didn't deny it. The doors burst open. Agent Reynolds entered with 2 others, badges raised. Grayson Keller, Eli Petrov, you're under investigation for securities fraud and wire fraud. Please come with us. Grayson tried to protest. Evan didn't move. The room turned to chaos. I stood still. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. My father leaned against the wall. Lyndon sat down slowly, bouquet slipping from her hand. You knew, she said, barely audible. I tried to tell you, I replied. Silence settled like ash, the wreckage of what could have been, but also what was saved. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. In the days that followed, everything unraveled. The wedding was canceled. The venue quietly scrubbed Lyndon's name from their calendar. News of the FBI investigation spread through my father's banking circles like wildfire. He stepped down from the credit union board within the month. My mother stopped calling altogether. Lyndon disappeared for a while. Some friend's lake house, I heard. She left behind a trail of silence and shame. She never apologized, not at first, not directly. But weeks later, a letter arrived in thick ivory paper. Her handwriting, unmistakable. I don't expect forgiveness, it began. But I finally see it. I see what I've done. And more importantly, I see what I let myself become. It wasn't an excuse, it was recognition. And that mattered more than I expected. Grayson, pleaded guilty. 5 years in federal prison. Evan, or Eli, took a deal. 3 years and restitution neither of them could pay. Their scam had nearly reached the finish line, and I had stopped it. I moved out of the apartment we once shared, sold the ring, took a job offer in Portland. Smaller firm, slower pace. But it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time, peace. I decorated my new apartment with soft things. Linen curtains, wooden shelves, a small herb garden on the balcony. No one's taste but mine. Some nights I still think about it all. How close I came to marrying a man who saw me as a gateway, not a partner. How easily my family offered me up, again, for someone else's gain. But those thoughts pass faster now. I'm learning that healing isn't a perfect arc. It's messy, sometimes quiet, sometimes sharp. But it's forward. Always forward. And for the first time in my life, I'm not building my identity around who I am to someone else. I'm just Thalia. Not the older sister, not the forgotten daughter, just me. And that's more than enough. My name is Lucian Trent, and at my sister's wedding, her father-in-law looked straight past me like I didn't even exist. He brushed by without a nod, without a glance. Just that air of quiet dismissal that men like him have spent a lifetime perfecting. I stood there in a tailored suit, drink in hand, knowing something he didn't. See, Roland Rowe, the man so proud of his last name he probably signs it in gold ink, had spent the last 6 months trying to buy out a tech company he didn't realize I co-founded. A company his own business relied on. A company I built from nothing while raising my sister from the ashes of our old life. But Roland only saw what he wanted to see. A nameless, titleless nobody. He saw the surface. That's what men like him do. And frankly, I was fine with that. Because in a few minutes, after I got called up for an impromptu speech, I would introduce myself. And when I did, everything about the way he looked at me would change. His posture, his expression, his grip on the wineglass. Some people don't like surprises. Roland? He turned pale. And I just smiled. They say the hardest part of loss is the silence that follows. That's true, but no one tells you about the noise that comes before it. The ring of a phone at an hour it should never ring. The static in your ears when someone says the words you swore you'd never hear. For me, it was the sound of my college advisor saying, "Lucian, there's been an accident." My father was gone. Just like that. One moment, he was planning a trip to visit me and my younger sister, Isolde. The next, I was driving back to a hometown that already felt foreign without him in it. I was 22 and exhausted from finals. Isolde was 17, 1 week shy of her high school graduation. We had no mother in the picture. She'd left years ago to reinvent herself with a new family. So it was just us. 2 orphans, 1 car, and a future that had just crumbled overnight. The funeral was a blur. What came after was brutal clarity. Debt. So much debt. My father had been self-employed, and somewhere along the way, things must have spiraled. Loans, missed payments, business liens. He must have been trying to protect us from it, shielding us until the very end. But once the obituary printed, the creditors came knocking, hard. They took everything. The house, the car, his workshop. All we had left was the small suitcase of clothes I'd packed for spring break. My scholarship covered tuition. But rent? Groceries? Isolde's tuition? We were on our own. That night, after the last relative left and the door clicked shut, I remember sitting on the floor with Isolde. She was crying, knees tucked under her hoodie, and I realized, no one else is coming. I was the only adult left in her world, so I made a decision. I would finish school, get a job, any job, and keep us above water. I took on work in the campus cafe, picked up evening shifts as a courier, and slept maybe 4 hours a night. There were days when I went to class still sweating from hauling boxes up 4 flights of stairs. But every dollar I earned stretched across 2 mouths, 2 lives. I lost my girlfriend somewhere along the way. She was kind, but she needed more than voicemail apologies and forgotten date nights. I let her go, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't have enough of myself left to give. People talk about building character like it's some polished process. Mine was forged in overdraft fees and bus transfers. It was built when I looked at my little sister and knew she still deserved a future, even if I had to burn mine to light the path. After graduation, I didn't celebrate. There was no cap toss, no party photos, just a quiet sigh and a job offer at a mid-sized firm doing back-end operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid, and that was enough. I moved us into a modest 1-bedroom apartment. Isolde took the bedroom. I took the couch. She started community college while I juggled spreadsheets and client calls. Every night, I cooked us dinner, even if dinner was just rice and eggs, and on weekends, I caught up on sleep in broken shifts. But even in that grind, I kept one eye on the future. I enrolled in online courses, marketing, automation systems, SaaS platforms, anything that could sharpen my skills. I didn't know what opportunity would come, but I swore I'd be ready when it did. It came one rainy Thursday evening. I got a message from Felix Marin, an old classmate who remembered my business instincts. He and another friend were building a tech tool for automating back-end systems. He needed someone who could handle operations and pitch to early clients. I was hesitant. It sounded unstable. But it also sounded alive. And I hadn't felt alive in years. So I said yes. My life split in two. From 8 to 5, I wore slacks and answered to middle managers. From 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., I lived in code bases, flowcharts, and pitch decks with Felix. We built out of coffee shops and borrowed server space. Some nights I passed out with my laptop still glowing on my chest. Money was tight. Arguments happened. One of our co-founders left after a brutal 6-month dry spell. Felix and I stayed. Barely. Then came the breakthrough. A corporate client piloted our tool and slashed their processing time by 40%. They told 3 others. Suddenly, we had demos booked, inboxes flooded, and feedback loops we barely had time to process. A review on a major tech blog gave us our first real wave of inbound interest. But even then, I didn't quit my day job. I'd learned too early how fragile stability could be. I saved every spare cent. I handled customer service tickets, invoicing, and system bugs in between lunch breaks and late nights. Felix became the public face. He networked, smiled at cameras, gave TEDx talks. I was the man behind the curtain, and I liked it that way. Because while others chased titles and LinkedIn clout, I chased something else: peace of mind. A life where Isolde didn't have to count every dollar at the grocery store. A life where her future wasn't defined by what we lost. She got into a state university on merit. I paid every bill on time. We had backup savings, health insurance, working appliances. That felt like luxury. No one saw how much it took, and I didn't need them to. But that silence, the choice to stay unseen, meant people like Roland Rowe could meet me and assume I was small. And that was fine by me, because I'd rather be underestimated than misjudged. I'd rather be invisible than falsely praised. But life has a way of bringing things full circle, especially when your sister decides to get married. It was a Tuesday night when Isolde called. I had just collapsed onto the couch, still in my work clothes, eating cold leftover pasta straight from the container. She sounded breathless, excited, but also strangely hesitant. "Lucian," she said, "I have something to tell you." I assumed it was about school, maybe a project or an internship. I didn't expect her next words. "I'm getting married." My fork paused in midair. "You're what?" "To Damien," she said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "We've been seeing each other seriously for a while now, but I didn't tell you because I didn't know how." I blinked. I'd met a Damien once, in passing, but I'd never heard her mention anything serious. "Isolde, married? That's huge. Are you okay?" She laughed nervously. "I'm more than okay. I'm happy. I just needed to tell you before things moved further. He wants to meet you." That caught my attention. Anyone who wanted to marry my sister had better want to meet me. I was her brother, yes, but more than that, I was the one who stayed. I'd played every role in her life that mattered: parent, tutor, emergency contact, friend. If someone wanted to step in now, I needed to look him in the eye and measure the shape of his soul. We arranged to meet that Friday. Just a casual dinner, nothing formal. I offered to cook. I still remember opening the door and seeing Damien standing there, flowers in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other, and a grin that tried a little too hard. Something about him felt familiar. We exchanged pleasantries, sat down, and talked. He was polite, well-spoken, clearly adored my sister, but there was something in his last name that tugged at me. "Rowe," I said aloud, turning it over in my head like a coin. "Any relation to Roland Rowe?" He paused for a fraction of a second too long. He's my father. That's when it clicked. Roland Rowe was one of our biggest enterprise clients. Not just that, he'd been actively trying to acquire our platform for months. His emails always came laced with thinly veiled offers, the kind that suggested he thought he was doing us a favor by showing interest. He was a businessman through and through, sharp suits, sharper tone, and a reputation for crushing partnerships just to own the scraps. He was all over the industry blogs. He wasn't evil, just dismissive, transactional. And now, here I was, sitting across the table from his son. I kept my face neutral, my tone even. I didn't mention the company, didn't bring up business at all. This was about Isolde. If Damien was decent, I'd find a way to make peace with the rest. Later that night, Isolde pulled me aside in the kitchen. You went quiet for a while there. Everything okay? I nodded. I'm just surprised. You really love him? I do, she said. He's not like his father, Lucien. He's kind, steady, he listens. I studied her face. She wasn't pleading, she was glowing. And she never glowed easily. Okay, I said at last. Then I'm in your corner. Weeks passed. Wedding planning took over her life. I offered to help where I could, but kept my distance from the formalities, until the family meet and greet. It was held at an upscale country club, all white tablecloths and waitstaff in black vests. Isolde asked me to attend, and I said yes, more for her than for them. I met Roland face to face that day. The moment I walked into the room, his eyes found me. He took me in quickly, shoes, suit, posture, before looking away. When we were formally introduced, he offered a limp handshake and said, "Oh, you're just her brother. I assumed her father would be here." I stared at him. Our father passed away, a long time ago. He gave the briefest nod of acknowledgement before moving on. Then came the inevitable question. What is it that you do, again? There it was, that investor instinct, sniffing out pedigree. I work corporate, I said. True, in a sense. He didn't hide his disinterest, didn't even try. And that was fine. I didn't come to impress him. But part of me, a small part I usually kept buried, whispered, "You'll regret that." I told Felix about the encounter later that night. He just laughed and said, "The universe has a weird sense of humor." The weeks flew by, and soon the wedding day arrived. Isolde looked radiant, the kind of beauty that didn't just come from the dress or the makeup. It came from knowing you were loved, and loving back without fear. She gripped my hand before walking down the aisle and whispered, "Thank you for everything." I just smiled. At the reception, I stayed out of the spotlight, chatting quietly with guests. Then I saw Roland approach with 2 other men. He walked past me, again. Didn't even pause. It was deliberate, calculated. And I felt nothing but quiet certainty. He still didn't know who I was. Not really. But he was about to find out. I wasn't planning to speak. There was no note in the program, no cue for a brother of the bride speech. I'd already played my role. Walked Isolde down the aisle, stood tall in family photos, raised my glass during toasts. That was enough. I didn't need the spotlight. But someone must have added my name to the speaker list. A member of the catering staff tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're next. 2 minutes." I blinked. Next for what? She gestured toward the stage. "Speech, the mic's ready." I could have declined. Should have, maybe. But something in me, some mix of fatigue, pride, and memory, told me not to. This was my sister's wedding. The closest thing I had to a daughter was entering a new life. And the room still didn't know who I was. So I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the front of the room. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. "My name is Lucien Trent. I'm Isolde's brother." That caught their attention. I continued. But I wasn't just her brother growing up. After our father passed unexpectedly, I became her guardian. I was 22. She was 17. We had no other family. Our mother had long since moved on. The room shifted. Glasses were lowered. Forks paused. I was finishing college when it happened, and I couldn't afford to fall apart, not when she needed food, a roof, tuition, so I worked, Day shifts, night shifts, weekends. I slept less than I'd like to admit. I lost friends. I lost someone I loved. I glanced at Isolde. She was already crying. But we made it, I said softly. She made it, because she's brilliant and brave and has a heart that forgave me for the moments I wasn't enough. A quiet rustle moved through the crowd. Even Roland, across the room, had turned to face me. I also want to say this, I added, my voice lifting just a bit. During those years, while trying to survive, I helped build a startup, a software platform. Some of you may even use it. That line landed harder than I expected. I saw heads tilt. A few guests exchanged glances. My co-founder, Felix, over there, joined me on a leap of faith. We started with borrowed code and busted laptops. Now we support some of the biggest firms in the country. I let that hang in the air. And while I didn't come here to talk business, I share it because it's part of the story. The same story that led me to this room, this day, this moment. I turned toward Isolde and Damien. I'm proud of you, both of you. You've found something rare: trust, partnership, joy. And I'm honored to stand here and say, you're ready. With that, I stepped away from the mic, nodded at the applauding room, and made my way back to my table. But I didn't get far. Roland Rowe intercepted me like a shadow emerging from the wall. He extended his hand, smile tight. Lucian, wasn't it? That was quite a speech. I shook his hand, firm but not eager. Thank you. You're the co-founder of E? I nodded. Yes. That company you've been trying to acquire. His smile faltered, just a fraction. I had no idea, he admitted. Why didn't you say anything when we met? I held his gaze. Because I wanted you to see who I was when you thought I was nobody. He didn't reply. Didn't need to. I gave him a polite smile. Enjoy the evening, Mr. Rowe. Then I walked past him, back to Felix, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. We clinked glasses. The tension dissolved. The rest of the night? Smooth, joyful. Isolde danced like a woman free of old shadows. Damien was gracious. Roland stayed civil. But something in his eyes had changed. Less arrogance, more calculation. That was fine. Because I hadn't said anything untrue. And I hadn't said everything either. We never sold the company to Roland Rowe, not out of spite. Not even because of how he treated me. Truth is, the offers were impressive on paper. But I've learned to look beyond numbers. His interest wasn't built on mutual respect. It was built on the assumption that everything and everyone has a price. And I don't do business with men who only learn your worth after they read your resume. So Felix and I stayed independent. We scaled with purpose. We didn't need a buyout. We needed space to grow on our terms. Ironically, Rowe Industries still licenses our platform. His employees file support tickets through the same portal as everyone else. We respond quickly, professionally. Always polite, never personal, strictly business. Damien never brought it up. He respects boundaries, and more importantly, he respects Isolde. Over time, we've built something close to trust. I don't hold his last name against him. He's not his father. He never was. Isolde is thriving. She has peace in her life now, real peace. She teaches, gardens, volunteers on weekends, and she smiles in a way she didn't when we were younger, when everything felt like it might fall apart any second. That smile is what I fought for. That's the return on my investment. Sometimes people still assume I'm just the guy in the background. Quiet, unremarkable. And I let them think that, because I know the truth. The ones who dismiss you when you're silent are the same ones who will scramble to respect you once someone announces your title. But by then, their respect means nothing. True respect shows up when no one's watching. It's not a reaction. It's a choice. Roland's biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was assuming that being unseen meant being unimportant. But I've never needed the spotlight. All I needed was to know that my sister would be okay. And now, she is. That's more than enough for me. If there's one thing this whole journey has taught me, it's this. You don't rise by being loud, by forcing people to see you. You rise by standing firm in who you are, quietly, steadily, and with dignity. When people finally notice, let it be on your terms, not theirs. Because at the end of the day, What matters most isn't who applauds you, it's who you protected while no one was watching.